This is going to be one of those videos where I'm really hoping that my schizophrenic rambling either causes a scientist to show up in the comments and translate what I just said into something real, or just prove me completely wrong. My husband and I are big fans of mead, honey wine, the oldest form of alcohol, the oldest form of fermented drink that we as humans had. And for a lot of history was kind of like one of the main things people drank because water wasn't super safe up until more recent times. It wasn't super alcoholic, but it was, alcoholic enough that you could drink it all day and become an alcoholic. Granted, it was unlikely you had access to nearly enough, but also the tolerance would have been way lower, and people also just had less self-control or theory of mind for most of human history, so I don't think it would have taken much to get them gone. Now, the story of mead is essentially the story of honey, and the story of honey goes back 100,000 years, which is basically to say, as it's practically speaking, as old as we know about. Bees did not exist in North America natively at all, but they were brought here almost immediately, and currently they can be found everywhere in North America. And the reason for that is everywhere humans have traveled throughout our history, we brought bees because we've loved honey as long as we've known about it. And I assume fairly early on, it was discovered that if you take all of the honey from a beehive, which is a resource that they use for hibernation and feeding their young, and that happens to, for human beings, have healing properties, to be just incredibly good tasting. It's naturally good for humans for whatever reason. This thing that these bees are doing for themselves, it happens to work extremely well for us too. And so if we take all of it, though, they're gonna die. So we have to create a system where we're making life so good for the bees that they produce more honey, in at least so good in specific ways. And therefore, with that excess, we can both keep them alive and keep taking their honey. Kind of seems like a win-win in a sense, because while the bees are kind of forced into a controlled environment by humans, it's very easy for bees to propagate because they fly and they're fast and they are kind of all over the place. And while they do not really function as individuals, they only kind of function as a hive unit. Nonetheless, they have managed to become now a commonplace insect everywhere all over the world because of the fact that humans just kept bringing them more places. And, they kept propagating beyond just what humans were using them for. And they're considered a protected species in a lot of places. In North America, there's certain types of bees you are legally not allowed to harm. I brought up the mead thing because Bird and I go to this place called Silverhand Meadery that's in Williamsburg, Virginia, which is a very historical town. And so they've kind of themed their meadery in history, where they give you a historical rundown of how mead came to be, and then you taste a bunch of honeys and they tell you where the honeys came from, and then you taste a bunch of meads and they tell you which meads connect to which honeys and all that. It's an in-depth tasting experience. Pretty fun. If you like honey and mead, you get to taste a shitload of honeys and meads that are very unique from one another. And as they were telling this story, they bring up that bees sort of accidentally created mead because, honey just ferments and becomes mead, and humans just kind of tasted this thing that existed and went, oh shit, we can recreate this. And I'm really wondering, how much is it really on accident? Is it possible that bees at some point collectively became aware of the fact that honey is loved by humans and evolutionarily doubled down on that? Because bees are extremely hive-minded creatures. They have a sensibility that, similar to ants, they can all operate in this really concerto. They can all, move around one another very effectively, is what I mean to say. So it's like, even though they don't have a ton of senses, they don't collect a ton of sensory data the way humans do, they collect extremely specific data that allows them to move, within the way they operate perfectly. And humans have figured out that, like, we can keep the bees doing that and, like, not interrupt that at all, and we just get to have honey forever, as long as we don't fuck with the bees. Getting stung by bees sucks, but do you want to give up honey? How often do you really get stung by bees? How many people are really even allergic to it? Is it that big a deal? We get the honey, man. Ambrosia. Ambrosia. There's this band called Cynic. They do progressive extreme metal. They have this song called The Lion's Roar, where they suggest in a lyric that animals were created by plants to move seeds around. And I don't know if that's like a scientific fact or anything. They write sci-fi songs, so I just kind of took it like, wait a minute, is that a thing? Like, because it sounds plausible that, like, we, in the effort of continuing to try to move seeds to new locations, plants evolved something that could do that? I don't know. Like, when they say created, what do they fucking mean by that is something I'm really wondering. But this feels like a similar situation where it's like, how much interdependence has there been evolutionarily between humans and bees, where, like, we're using this honey for all kinds of shit. It's got all kinds of benefits that it's hard to really understand, how deep do those benefits really go for us as humans compared to how deep those benefits go for bees. Because for us, honey is basically the foundation of addiction. It's like the first intensely sugary, sweet substance that humans got hooked on, and it's the first alcohol that humans got hooked on. So, like, basically all of the culture of addiction, all of the human culture of addiction follows from honey. It starts with honey. And that culture of addiction has mostly done negative things for humanity, because it creates all these power structures where people are trying to collect the honey above, they want more honey than the next person. There's not enough honey to go around, so I have to have all the honey for myself. And that honey can literally, like, I think our fascination with gold as a color, with, like, gold metal, comes from honey being gold. Like, we have this deep mental association as a species with honey as a positive, and with gold, that color, as a positive, and with bees, in spite of the fact that we know we need to stay away from them because they can sting us, we also think, oh, but they're cute, and they very cleverly make themselves apparent for us. Like, they have a color scheme that humans recognize immediately. Yellow is the fastest registering color for humans. So bees are always warning you that they're nearby. They don't want to sting you. They're only going to do it if they feel extremely threatened, and it, like, kills them. It's like a suicide bomb, like, basically to warn you about what you're, like, hey, don't mess with bee civilization. We have a codependent relationship. We are literally a protected species. You humans have organized in your government to decide you're not allowed to hurt us. You're technically not allowed to hurt each other, but, like, the bees are just as protected. And probably less likely to get hurt because, again, nobody wants to fuck with a bee. You instinctively just think, oh, that thing's going to sting me and it's going to really suck, Also, they're fast, they're hard to get. They're very well suited to combat with humans. And yet, they're also very well suited to coexistence with humans. So, who's really in charge is basically what I'm asking. Because if humans were really in charge, then we'd have all the bees in captivity. But we don't. Bees run freely all over the place. And hornets run freely all over the place. I don't know if those are native either, but having been to New River Gorge in West Virginia is full of hornets. Like, unbelievably full of hornets. They're clearly a dominant species there. And I don't really know what humans are to do about that. What could you do to stop how many hornets there are? If there is something that kills hornets and not bees, it's going to somehow have to become necessary, because like humans want the bees and not the hornets, but like they're both they have the same advantages that make them very difficult to get rid of, you know? I wonder if we've accidentally allowed like too much bandwidth. Because, like, for instance, I think yeast bandwagoned on honey, right? Because, like, the introduction of yeast into the fermentation of honey to create beer, like, was also considered, like, incidental, you know? Just like these are things that humans keep around. But, like, evolutionarily, again, these species have to, on some level, figure out, in the same way that humans have, and the same way that many animals have, that there is interdependent relationships between the species. It's just coded into our DNA. It's deep, deep, deep knowledge from ancestors way, 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 way back before we could ever have record of, except for in our DNA, except for in our innate understanding of stay away from bee, but also get close to honey. Let me know what you think in the comments. Does this make sense? Do bees have control? Are the bees the ones running the humans? Or is it just like a happy accident for them? Like, is this all just human hubris trying to play God accidentally led to bees having this like unchecked advantage? Or did the bees develop themselves specifically towards this advantage? Because it seems like that to me. They couldn't have always been the way they are, but 100,000 years is a long time for a species with such a short lifespan to evolve, you know? So I think bees have heavily evolved around their existence with humans. But you tell me what you think in the comments. Bees forever.